You're either on the bus or you're off the bus.
Welcome aboard. It's episode 13 of Ridin the Bus, the official I Am a Wild podcast presented by Explore Minnesota, coming your way. Ben Gislason here, Joey Goldstein to my right, and we are off into the season now.
We're
Our
back.
first in-season podcast.
We're back.
We joked about it later in this episode, and people will get to that we have our interview with Mike Murray, which was just wonderful. We joked about it, and we'll joke about it again. Maybe when we said this in the off season, we were optimistically hoping that we would be able to do it, but we also in the back of our mind went, boy, if we get too busy, we may end up, we can't do it. So here we are. We have it going, and that's just great for us. We're excited to be back. We were both smiling when we were setting up down here in the locker room today. So, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
It's been, what our last episode was September?
Did we do one in
August?
September?
I don't know. I don't remember.
I feel like we didn't do it in September.
It does. It feels like it's been a while, but there's been a lot that's happened between now and then. It's been very, very busy. Obviously you're hearing this. We're just getting through opening weekend, and that is a crazy week in its own right. Yeah. But we also had a lot happen in the week leading up to that, where we had, Minnesota was here for an open practice, free to the public, middle of the day on a Tuesday. To have 1,500 people in the building is outstanding. To see guys like Kirill Kaprizov, Marc-Andre Fleury, and your alumni come down here and skate and have some fun and sign some autographs, that was outstanding. The day before that, we've got our golf outing, our annual golf outing, which for the first time in a couple of years we could bring players back to, which was outstanding. And then, all the preparations for opening night, your rehearsals, your run-throughs, making sure everything runs without a hitch, which I think for the most part it did. I think the only thing you could have hoped for opening weekend to have gone better would have come out on top on the scoreboard. But I think, we were talking about it. It is early in the season. We've got a young group. There's adjustments people are gonna figure out along the way. But we saw a lot of positives in those games. I
want to get to a couple of things you just brought up, open practice and the home opener. But before we get there, bring us an Explore Minnesota read, because we had so much fun with it towards the end of the off season.
Yeah.
So
I like to read.
Again, thanks to our friends at Explore Minnesota for presenting you with this show. Joey, what does Explore Minnesota want our viewers and listeners to know about what's going on in the fall up in the state of hockey?
Yeah, they want to know. They want us to tell you about nature, which I think we're all for.
We are.
There's moments everyone should experience, from the prairies to the caves or bluffs of southern Minnesota to vibrant cities, food, and theater of the metro area, to beauty and tranquility of lake country. It's part fact, part feeling, 100% real. Start your dream vacation by visiting exploreminnesota.com.
Those reads are so much better when you do them.
Yeah,
I'm so glad I read them so boringly.
Listen, I may stumble over a word or two, but we're gonna get it out there, and we're gonna have some fun.
The open practice, to me, I didn't know what to expect. I was here for the preseason game. I think it was 2018. I wasn't working with the organization at the time, but I was a friend of the organization, if you want to call it that, which really just means I was doing anything I could to try to get into the organization.
We are.
Yeah, here we are. So I came over and helped on the PR side that day, and that was a remarkable experience. But I didn't know what we were expecting for that Tuesday. We did have an idea of what we were going to get fan-wise, because we had some tickets, if you will, mainly just to help us get ready for security, concessions, et cetera.
Know how many people are going to be in the building.
You wanted to track who are going to come. But still, when you get that number, you obviously know you're not going to get the number that you get. You're going to get something under that. But 1,500 fans for a Tuesday, late morning, afternoon, in the middle of a workday, in October, where there could be other outdoor escapades people want to go on, if they're going to take a day off, they're going to take lunch off. I mean, there was a lot of competing factors. You think about the heart of fandom of hockey, and it's January, February, the stretch run. It's not October. But to have that in Tuesday, I just left that day thinking, for anybody that wants to come and talk to me and say that Des Moines is not a hockey town, bring it on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, what a way to kick off 10 years in the city, too. I think that's probably the number that we had. That's well over a 50% show rate, which is fantastic. But yeah, like you said, it's a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of the week. Like, and we had people coming down. People were rolling in through the doors still up until like towards the very end. People were just on their lunch break, stopping down. Why not spend it down at the arena watching some hockey, getting some autographs? Like, it was just, I don't know. I think it was, to your own horn a little bit. I think we did a really good job, executing with everything that we were given, and all the instructions and everything that we had. I think the best quote I heard from the weekend was in Marc-Andre Fleury's media availability. He's been talked to a lot of the guys who played here, and a lot of them say, this is one of the best places to play in the American League, and that's something that I always heard coming into here, and now that I'm here, I without hesitation would say that this is hands down one of the best places to play in this league. So it's nice to see some of those guys get to experience that.
Well, and for Fleury, I had the absolute privilege to get to interview him after the game, or after the skate, which for me was, I kind of had to walk away and pinch myself. It's Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah.
I just had to talk to him. Wow, just really grateful. But behind me, when we were doing that on-ice interview, was 50 to 60 kids that were screaming the whole time. And I remember asking him, I said, Marc-Andre, I know you have fans all over the world, but did you think you had fans that were going to be coming here wearing Wild jerseys, Vegas jerseys, Pittsburgh jerseys, all with your name on the back of them here in Des Moines? He just laughed and said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And it was a really good showing for a place that we know has great hockey people and great hockey fans, but on a grander stage to the National Hockey League folks, it was an arrival for, I think, our fan base, and I think Minnesota got to see that. They got to. And it wasn't just for the practice. They were here for a few days and talking to Bill Guerin, talking to Dean Evison. Dean's a huge golf nut, loves golf. They played the Harvester Golf Course. He was blown away by it. They were all blown away by this golf course. And, I mean, let's think about where some of these guys are probably getting to play golf at and with the access that they get as National Hockey League GMs, head coaches, players, et cetera. And everybody said Harvester was just spectacular, which I've heard as well. I won't get to play there. But nonetheless, I think it was a home run for Des Moines, a home run for the partnership between Minnesota and Iowa. Not that it needed it, but just the fact that they got to come down here and see it firsthand what this place is all about, not just hear about it, that goes a really long way.
I think it's not only a huge thing for Minnesota, too, to see what the fan base down here and the support that we get, but I think it was awesome for our guys to see the NHL team come down here as well. I mean, I know I was standing up at the autograph table I was working. It's right by the north doors, which is the elevator, which our guys take up and down towards the locker room. And I remember, we finished the autograph session, and then a huge wave of our guys had just left, and they had been done with practice for 2 hours at that point. So, like, these guys, I think it was good for them to stick around and see, what it's like when the NHL team's here, what it's like to be that. I mean, obviously the guys go to training camp and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's a little different. Like, these are your superstars. It's to see how our fan base reacts to that. It should hopefully, light a fuse and inspire some of these guys to say, this can be you at some point if you put in the work, you put in the time and the effort.
Last thing I'll say on it, we did bury the lead. The real winners were the fans, and the highlight that'll keep playing on repeat in my head. I was crossing 3rd Street because I like to go from where our front offices are in Vets Auditorium to where my office is in the arena of Wells Fargo. We have a walkway under, which I take during the winter. But when it's still nice out, I like to get outside, get some fresh air. I love the fall weather. So I was walking across the street, and that's when I first saw the line. I was like, goodness. And this was maybe 8:45 before the Iowa Wild practice.
Wrapped around the building almost.
And I saw a dad and his kid walking up, and the kid had an original Minnesota Wild, white with the gold stripes down the shoulder, greens on the shoulder, like the original. I used to have one. He had the original Wild jersey on, and he had a Fleury hat on, and I just thought, this is a kid who maybe never thought he'd get to see Marc-Andre Fleury, get something signed by Marc-Andre Fleury, and here we are. So to get to be a part of a group that helped set that up and to make some dreams come true, that's the real cherry on top for me, and that's the real. I was thinking the Shooter McGavin quote: "The real winners here are the city of Texas." Yeah. Man, oh boy, you guys must put something in the water. No. But the real winners here were the fans, and to get to experience that. I thought it was a 10 out of 10. So a big thanks to the Minnesota Wild for picking Des Moines as their retreat spot, which I'm sure maybe some of the players went, what? And then they left, and I was talking to a few of them, and they went, no, this place is great. I hope we come back sometime. So, a fantastic Tuesday. The weekend, for a lot of reasons, home opening weekend was fantastic. Congratulations to you and the team that you built, the San Jose Barracuda, of course. And you raised them out of the ground now, an opening 2 wins on the weekend. Way to go. Congratulations on that.
I should have taken my chance to brag about Massachusetts when we were talking to Mike when he gave it to me, and I didn't because now I should have. I regret that.
I know
it's been too long.
I know you bleed red and blue or red and green now, but I had to give that to you. But nonetheless, that first game was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, the first half of it was not incredible. The Wild did not look good. You ask anybody in the locker room, and they'll tell you that it was a sleepy start. But when they woke up, and that third period, that 3-on-3 overtime was one of the most memorable I've had.
Yeah.
You had a 2-on-1 shorthanded rush right off the hop where O'Rourke has that great chance.
You have one of the winding seconds.
Chafee almost ends the game. That was just it was wire to wire, wall to wall entertainment in that overtime. And I think that was as entertaining of a game as you could have gotten without Iowa winning on night one. It really was. Just how could you not want to come back? And the next night, Iowa never really got going. I was talking to some people after the game. It kind of felt like they got to the ledge a few times. They were close to jumping off the diving board and going in head first, but they just never really got off the ledge, I felt like. But the overarching theme to the whole weekend is, I mean, I should do this, but someone should do an average on the age of this team right now, and I would probably guess it's up there with some of the youngest in the league. So it's a young team. It's early. And young or not young, you've got only 12 players back from a 25-man roster a year ago, so you are going to have growing pains. There are going to be players that just don't get what it's like to play with X player or Y player or their new defensive partner. I mean, there was one shift in the first game where I think it was Simon Johansson, and I forget who the other player was. There was a loose puck, and they both sat and stared at it. And I'm like, that doesn't happen at the American League level. Only in night one does that happen, where you have two new players who are kind of going, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So I hope no one's pulling the fire alarm yet, because the really encouraging thing for me when we left that night one was when that team woke up, San Jose didn't have a clue.
No, they had no chance. And it happened like in an instant. It was, we got one goal, and then I think the guys, you smell that blood in the water, and it's just instinct kicks in, and you go. And there's going to be growing pains. I think it was night one. I think you were interviewing Nick Patan, is that correct, on the broadcast? And he even said, we're still trying to get to know each other a little bit, kind of getting a feel for lines and combinations. And so there is going to be that, but you also have, like you said, a lot of young guys. Some things that work at the junior level aren't going to work here. And it's understanding
a lot of things that work at the junior level don't work here.
Little things like that, but those are all things that are going to be adjusted. I'm like, in no way, shape, or form am I looking at this past weekend and going, whew. It is going to be a long 34 more games.
The opposite of it, actually.
Yeah, I feel very good about it. I think it's a young and a very talented team, which I know we didn't get to talk to Mike about it, but it's really built from the back end out. You got some strong goaltending, some very highly touted prospects on the defensive end, and you got guys who can score a lot of goals too up front. But that back end is really where you're probably the most solid.
And he actually does bring that up. You've asked him about some of the players, and we'll get to the Mike Murray interview shortly, but you said who are some of the players aside from the top heavy ones, the Chafees, the Beckmans, the Volsteads, who is a part of the back end, but he went right to the decor. He went right to Ryan O'Rourke, Damon Hunt, Simon Johansson, so he went to. But before we get there, 10-year tidbits presented by Explore Minnesota. What do you got for us, Joey? And then we will get to general manager of the Iowa Wild, Mike Murray.
Yeah, we've got a handful of them. A lot of things that have happened over the last couple weeks since we last talked. We talked a lot about promo schedule in the weeks since we rolled out a couple new promos. Our whole local concert series lineups is out there. We had our first one with Jake Simon at the tailgate on opening weekend, but a lot of the bands we've seen in years past are coming back out. Birdchild Duo, Tank Anthony Band, The Sheet. We're going to get some new ones in here. The Schmidt Brothers Band will be here. Some other solo artists, some duos throughout the year. So every Saturday night, you can expect that on the concourse all season long. We have, obviously we talked a little bit about with Mike, but our captains have been announced, which I think is a pretty big deal. Mason
Yes.
Shaw getting to wear the C after overcoming more adversity than
most players. Than most players do.
He's
in their
gone
whole
through a
career.
lot. Yeah, so he's going to lead the charge, and you got guys like Dakota Murmis, Joe Hickett's, Stephen Fogarty, all wearing the letters on the support system, which I think is fantastic.
Stephen
too.
Fogarty, who got named alternate captain 2 days into being in
Yeah,
Des Moines.
he hadn't even been down here, which is
I thought
like,
that was it's like so you're wondering if he's a good leader. Well, that says all he needs to say right there. 2 days and they slap an A on his chest.
Yep. We've got some new hires in the front office, which I think are important to call out, especially because a bulk of them are on the ticket side, who our fans are going to interact with a lot. So Nils, Nick, and Casey are all new on the ticket sales side. Nils is really helping out on the group side, but Nick and Casey are really your Wild 365 members. These are guys you're going to be talking to all the time, which helps because right now, or before they got here, it really been Colton kind of doing things by himself for a little while, so it's nice to get him some support.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the social media side of things, new Twitter admin for everybody out there who's dying to know. Jessica Dunham joined us from the Sioux Falls Stampede, so she's
good USHLer. I love those USHLers.
She is she's got the keys to the kingdom. She's the one behind the accounts, so she's done a great job. It was wild. Her very first day was the Minnesota Open practice. Casey's very first day was opening night. So like everybody just kind of got thrown into the mix, and they've all done a great
good
job
luck.
so far.
Have fun today.
Yeah, they've all done really, really well. So that's exciting to have all them on board. We're really rounding out the staff now that the season's starting. And the last one I got, just more of a heads up, in our episode that we're going to record next month, we are going to have a Explore Minnesota sweepstakes running for some. It's a huge, I mean, what you guys were used to in the past that we've run on social. It's a big Explore Minnesota prize pack, basically like a getaway and all kinds of stuff. So more details on that to come, but we will let everybody know how they can get involved in that when we run that next month. So that's kind of what I got for 10-year tidbits. Ready to kick it over to Mike.
Yeah, a wonderful chat with Mike, as I knew it would be. He's just a guy that has so many levels and layers to him. There's the hockey player, Mike Murray, which we talk about, not only at Dartmouth College, but a fascinating
couple different stuff.
A fascinating 2 seasons of professional hockey for Mike before he then went on to become summa cum laude at his law school at Suffolk. This is a guy that's got a lot of different layers and is a really interesting, fascinating guy. And for my money, is doing a wonderful job. Just not only being a boss to me in a lot of ways, but just with running this organization, and the way he runs it down here is so professional and so firm. I have a lot of respect for this guy. So without any further ado, let's hear from him. He's the Director of Hockey Operations for the Minnesota Wild and the Iowa Wild General Manager, Mike Murray. Welcome to the second period, hockey fans and Ridin the Bus podcast listeners. This is episode 13 of Ridin the Bus, the official Iowa Wild podcast, presented by Explore Minnesota. He's Joey Goldstein. I'm Ben Gislason. And with us virtually today, unfortunately, we couldn't line it up schedule-wise while you were in Des Moines, the general manager of the Iowa Wild and the director of hockey operations for the Minnesota Wild. We're going to get into those dual roles. Mike Murray is with us here today. Mike, we've had you on the list of guests for a while, but we wanted to wait till we got into the season with you because more so than any of our alumni guests, you're someone that we can talk about in the now. Hockey season is here, so happy belated hockey season to you, Mike, and thanks so much for joining us here today.
You bet. It's good to be here with you guys. And absolutely makes sense. We got a couple games under our belt here now. We've made it through basically a month of training camp with our prospects tournament, the big club training camp, our training camp in Iowa, a couple games now. So, yeah, definitely some material to talk about.
We are going to get into the now, but we do want to maybe go backwards with you to start, as we do with all of our guests, except for one, as Joey always likes to point out, because I forgot to ask this question to Landon Ferraro when we had him on this summer. But everyone else I've asked it to. You spent a lot of time on the bus in your hockey career or in your staff career in hockey, and this is the Ridin the Bus podcast, so we want listeners and viewers to feel like they're on the bus with Mike Murray. So can you tell us a great bus story or a funny bus story that you think back on and that will never leave your mind from your time on all the miles I'm sure you put on the bus in your life?
Oh, that's a good question. Put me on the spot because I've listened to some of your other podcasts and guests, and have certainly enjoyed their stories. Oh man, I wasn't ready for that one. As you were um, preparing that question there, I guess the one that popped into my mind when I was at Dartmouth in college playing, we were on a late night bus ride coming home after a game somewhere in New York, I think coming back from St. Lawrence or Clarkson, January or February, snowy day. And our bus driver, we had the same bus driver for every trip for all 4 years. And, we were all half asleep on the bus. And I just remember our trainer who sat right behind the bus driver yelling at him, "Hey, hey, hey." And the bus swerves into the other lane, and you hear the bus driver go, "Whoa," dozed off there for a
Oh
second.
my God.
And kind of, when the bus swerves like that, you hear somebody yelling. It grabs everyone's attention on the bus, and I don't think any of us were sleeping the rest of that bus ride home.
Yeah,
That's
that gives me the
yeah.
willies.
Oh, man.
That makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Well,
Yeah,
we're on the bus now.
We're
we are
on
the
and we're
bus.
awake.
Yeah,
We're on and we're
Yeah.
awake.
we're awake
Yeah,
on
so-
the bus.
So I always remember that one for sure.
How could you not? So, Mike, you're someone that, like many people that are within the American Hockey League realm, you have multiple roles, but your roles are obviously two that are extremely integral, not only to the Iowa Wild, but to the Minnesota Wild. And even to some extent, I don't think I fully grasp all of your duties. Obviously, more so with Minnesota are the ones I don't grasp, and the ones here, it's a little simpler, at least how you describe being a general manager. But for fans, and maybe for me a little bit too, give us a little bit of a snippet of what your roles look like between being the director of hockey operations with the Minnesota Wild and then, of course, the general manager of the Iowa Wild.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ben. And I think, my primary responsibility really and my most extensive time commitment is to being the GM of the Iowa Wild. And that, as you know, is really being on site as much as possible with the team in Iowa. I am based in St. Paul, but whether it's at our home games here in Des Moines or meeting you guys on the road, wherever that may be, is being kind of our front office hockey operations presence with the Iowa Wild as much as possible to let the players know that management is there, is watching, is evaluating them. Being there for Tim Army and his coaching staff and our sports staff, the trainers and our equipment guys there. And then really being the liaison between the Minnesota Wild and the Iowa Wild, so that when Dean Evison and Bill Guerin and us as a hockey operations group are evaluating player recalls, potential player trades, the depth of our AHL roster organization. I can speak to that with my firsthand knowledge from being with the club in that regard. And then kind of as that translates to my role with the big club, again, it's working with Billy, with Chris O'Hearn, with Matt Sells, with our group there, and really just kind of we're an all hands on deck group. We all kind of have our individual areas of responsibility, but we work as a unified group and kind of the decision making process. And Billy's the ultimate decision maker, but we all weigh in on those decisions and try and provide the best information so that as an organization we're making the best decisions possible.
You've said this before to me, to us as a group. We all have very special positions in what we get to do. We get to be behind the curtain for a National Hockey League, American Hockey League teams. These are special roles. But they're still jobs, and I know there are certain parts of this, there are probably lots of these roles that you really cherish, but there are also sides of it that maybe you don't like so much. Can you give us maybe one thing that you think, when I wake up in the morning, I look forward to getting to do this? Maybe one thing that I wake up in the morning and Mike Murray says, "Oh boy, I don't want to do this today," that's a part of your role.
Probably the hardest part, Benny, is I guess maybe the unknown of what might come every day. So we have, roughly 22, 23 players on our NHL roster, another 25 or so on our AHL roster. And kind of my areas of responsibility is if something happens to those 50 players, there's a trickle down effect of action that needs to take place. And you're very well involved in that as well. So if the big club has a game on a Friday night and a player gets hurt, That there is a chain of events that unfold there, and if a player needs to be recalled, that at 11 o'clock that night after the game, we're making decisions on who that player may be, who best fits that role to be recalled. Then that's getting it. If I'm not with the team, the AHL team at the time, it's getting in touch with Tim Army, wherever the team Iowa may be, whether it's in Des Moines or it could be Manitoba, it could be California. Notifying that player and somehow getting them to the big club, wherever the big club may be. So it's really the unknown of what's coming every day, which in a way is one of the best parts of the job too. But some of that you have to pivot very quickly. You may wake up with a plan for the day, and it can change very, very quickly.
Isn't that the truth? And there's the reason why when I put my phone on Do Not Disturb before I go to bed at night, Mike Murray is one of a handful of people that
can get through.
It gets through the Do Not Disturb firewall. Yeah, my phone goes off.
There are certain people that no matter the hour of the day, you are answering those phone calls, and that works for me and I think a whole network of us.
Isn't that the truth? Let's get to the fun stuff, Mike. Building a roster. To me, I could sit and talk to people like you who are in the GM chair about this all day because it is so fascinating. There's no one way to do it. Yes, there are certain characteristics that obviously all GMs are looking for, but I guess as best you can, we don't have all the time in the world. You don't have all the time in the world. When you're building a roster, what didn't you know about building a roster before you got into the GM chair that you know now?
That there's a lot of moving pieces. And there's a lot of vested interests at stake. So especially in the AHL role, building the AHL roster, you have your prospects, your draft picks that are coming in. So you have to make space for them. You have your group of players who have already been pros for maybe 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5 years that are still kind of in their development path and knocking on the door to hopefully become NHL players, and then mixing that with your veteran players you're surrounding those players with. And in a lot of cases, those veteran players, they still have hopes and aspirations to become full-time NHL players as well. So it's a balancing of all those interests. And, it goes from what Bill Guerin and Dean Evison want the roster to look like, to what our coaching staff wants the roster to look like, to what the player development guys want the roster to look like, to what our Judd Brackett and our amateur scouts want it to look like. And it's trying to mesh all that together and in a sense, keep everyone pleased when it comes to opportunity, ice time, playing time. There's a lot of interest at stake.
Can it be tricky? I mean, when you're looking at the AHL team specifically, can it be tricky to really build that roster when it's hard to predict who's going to make the big club, who's going to be here, who's not? Like, can you have too many players? Does that come about? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, in our positions, we project a lot of what we expect the future to look like. When we're planning in the off season, when we're planning during the season, what subsequent things may look like, but nothing's etched in stone. Ultimately, as Billy says every day on the first day of training camp, it's up to the players to make those decisions for us. And while we may project a player is on this timeline or this path, they may speed up that timeline for us, or they may not quite be ready for that. And then we have to adjust our thought process of what things may look like. So yeah, you plan and you project, and then like everything, there are curveballs thrown into that. But the best part is that in our organization, which I think our actions speak for it, is the players dictate that timeline, and then we adjust accordingly. And it's never a bad problem to have too many good players. And that's what our hope is that we have tough decisions to make because the players are making us make those decisions.
Executing a trade, something that the kids growing up, you play NHL on Xbox and you love executing trades, right? When there's literally no skin in the game, it's a bunch of computerized characters that don't mean anything. It's very different when it's very real and you have human beings that are in the discussion and that are going to be moving towns and wives and children. But executing a trade, Mike, can you walk us through maybe the steps of how does a trade begin? give us like, the walkthrough of the process of a trade, because these are things that Joey will never get to be involved in that. I'll never get to be involved in that. Our listeners won't get to be involved in that. What does that scenario look like from your chair?
Yeah, from my experience, and it's been somewhat limited here, but working with Billy through in our management group through some of the NHL trades. What do we have? One last year at the AHL level, I think, one or two. Each one's a little different. There is no set kind of standard form to follow with on a trade. Some of those conversations take place for weeks, which turn into months until it finally comes to fruition. Others are a matter of hours. A phone call can take place in the morning. It piques both sides' interests, and it leads to something being done immediately. And I think that speaks to where our roster may be at the time, where the roster is of the club you may be talking to, the players involved, the need. I mean, each situation is different, and that kind of speaks to everything with the roster building. Each negotiation with the player is differently. Sometimes they come together very, very quickly where there's a common end goal there and both sides get there very quickly. Other times it can take months, weeks and months to find that common ground to get something done. So there is no kind of set path and timeline, in each conversation or negotiation or trade talk kind of takes on a life of its own, for sure.
One of the trades that we had last year, in acquiring Brandon Baddock from Montreal, we sent Andrew Hammond to Montreal, bring back Brandon Baddock, give us some size, some physicality. He re-signs with us over the summer. Can you talk a little bit about like the thought behind having like the importance of having that kind of a person in the lineup? I mean, you see Bads, he's a massive human being, right? So how important is it to have somebody like that in your lineup with a team that's pretty young like ours is?
Yeah, absolutely. The role that Brandon fulfills on our roster, and that Cody McLeod had done that for years before, and the two of them together for kind of the second half of last year there that we had, it's very important. You have a lot of young players who are finding their way in pro hockey, and there's quite an age gap to some of these kids in their young 20s to you're playing against men who are fighting for their job and their paycheck and to support their families. And to have that support of your teammates, guys who have been there before, know that they have their back, and makes everyone feel a little bit more comfortable on the ice. And it doesn't just all fall on Brandon's shoulders either. I think that's one of the things that Tim Army stresses with our club is kind of that team toughness mentality. You mess with one player, you have 20 other guys that got their back right there. And Brandon is certainly a big part of that. A leader in that role, as you can tell in the style of play that he brings every night. But he's also a hell of a hockey player too. The type of player that your old-fashioned goon who is just out there to fight a couple times a night and do that night after night after night. That type of player doesn't really exist. If you can't play hockey, it doesn't matter how tough you are. You can't play at the AHL or NHL level anymore. And so it's a credit to Brandon and Cody before that to bring the style of play that they do while being, positive contributing members to the club every night as well.
I want to get into more of the path, Mike, of how you got to where you are now. But before we get there, I know that there were some fan questions that you had from the Twitter side to get to before we sort of get off the Wild train and get on to more of the Mike Murray train. I didn't want to go over. I know you had those written on. I didn't want to go over the head on that because I thought there were some really good questions from our fans.
And some of them we even just answered in some of the ones that came up. I guess the first one on here, we saw last week. Minnesota comes down, had an awesome day here with the open practice. In the past, Minnesota has come down for a preseason game. The success that had, with the success that the practice had, is that something that could potentially be in the works in the future to get another preseason game down here for the Wild?
Yeah, I think that was a great experience for everyone, really. It was nice for the community of Des Moines to see kind of the NHL stars come down for the day. And then I think it was especially special for the players that have come through Iowa and graduated to the big club. Recently, Matt Boldy, Kalen Ass, and Marco Rossi, Brandon Duhaime before that, Connor Dewar. It's nice for them to be able to return to kind of where their pro career started for them, and get to see a lot of familiar faces, and for the fans to enjoy that and kind of rekindle those relationships as well. And then for the guys who haven't been here, for kind of our superstars, Kirill and Fleury and Net. Fleury played in the AHL for a time in Wilkes-Barre, and I think it brings back a lot of special memories for those guys, kind of where it all started for them. And as an organization, it was great, just to see the involvement and the energy it brought to the day for us, kind of our team retreat with the big club being back here. It was a special day, and for the big club, a good few days down in the Des Moines area. And certainly something I can see in the future, us, reliving in some form or another.
Awesome. And the other question, kind of a combo, one of the ones that I had written down. So obviously, we talk ad nauseum about the guys like Jesper Wallstedt and Adam Beckman and Mitchell Chafee. These guys who are the higher prospects on the depth chart and things like that. But who are guys who are maybe flying under the radar, who Wild fans should keep an eye on? Who's someone you expect to really have a breakout year? Who are guys like that in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, you named a few names right there to begin with. I mean, an exciting one certainly is the second half of the year that Mitchell Chafee had. He turned into an elite scorer in the AHL, and we certainly hope to see that continue for him as well here this season and carry that momentum of what he did in the second half of the year for us last year. And then, as an organization, we're really excited about the three blue liners, the kids that we've incorporated to our blue line group there with Rourke and Damon Hunt and Simon Johansson, kind of all coming here at the same time. And it's nice that they can lean on each other as they're beginning their pro careers. I know Simon played professionally back home in Sweden for a few years, so technically not, a rookie for pro purposes, but a rookie in North America here. And the three of them going through that together, and that they've been surrounded by, potentially Dakota Mermis when he becomes healthy. If we see him on our roster, and Joe Hicketts, who is here, Turner Ottenbright, who's been a mainstay in our locker room the last few years. Andre Schuster, who's up with the big club. If we're healthy, he may see time here. So it's an exciting group that we've put together on the blue line that we're really looking forward to seeing kind of our recent draft picks of the last few years finally here in Des Moines and starting their careers.
Now we really saddle up on the bus, and we're going to dive deep into Mike Murray now. I mean, this is what I always like, because I think as guests on things, we like talking about ourselves. So I'm looking forward to not only getting some stuff out of Mike, but we've got a few things I think that'll surprise him, which is always fun.
Yep.
So I want to take it back prior to when you came into the Minnesota Wild organization, better part of a decade with the American Hockey League office. You were the guy fielding the angry phone calls from people like yourself or coaches or who have you. But give us the role of the vice president of hockey operations of the American Hockey League. You were that, and then, of course, executive vice president with the league for almost a decade.
Yeah, it was 9 years at the AHL League office there in Springfield, Mass. And I'm very thankful for every day of that time, as it prepared me for my position now to step in as part of the management group with Billy in Minnesota and my responsibilities here with the team in Iowa. And it was really all things hockey operations related. You name it, I was involved in it, from the scheduling to the player discipline, to the officiating, to rules, regulations, bylaws, all of that. It was just a daily team servicing, I guess you could say. And our kind of joke in the office was, unfortunately, the phone never rings for a good reason, though. Someone's always calling, and they're not usually telling you that you're doing a good job. So, again, it was, I wouldn't give back a day of it. It was a great 9 years, and again, helped me be prepared to do what I'm doing now, for sure.
I don't expect you to name names, but could you give us the gist of maybe one of the angriest phone calls you ever received, and what maybe that entailed?
Is not surprisingly, when you get into the playoffs, tensions are obviously a lot higher, right? And the deeper you go into the playoffs, everything becomes magnified. And yeah, and everyone's a little bit more on edge around then. So it's not really a specific team or instance or situation. It's more so every spring for 9 years, from basically April to June. Things were a lot more tense, and I worked very closely with Dave Andrews, the former president and CEO of the AHL, and he and I really worked through every hockey operations and on ice related issue for those 9 years together. We leaned on each other, and that was kind of our inner support system, he and I. And he always said that he could sleep easy at every night, because every decision we ultimately made, we did with the best interests of the AHL in mind. And probably, you ask anyone, they probably weren't always the right decision, but at least we were trying to make the right decision.
Do you feel like you maybe have an edge because you know the way that the league thinks, if you're trying to maybe not get your way, but get your point across, if you are now on the other side of that, calling from the team side?
Yeah, I think certainly my background and kind of my knowledge, knowing the ins and outs of a lot of the rules and regulations, which in a sense I helped write a lot of those and form and craft and discuss with people over the years. So yeah, knowing the ins and outs certainly helps, and in a lot of respects saves a lot of time too, instead of having to call the league office to get clarification on how something works, or if you have a question, or somebody in our front office, or Timmy or the coaching staff, any of our hockey operations group has a question, or Billy or the rest of our management group for that matter, more often than not, I kind of know the answer right off the bat instead of having to go look for it. So it's definitely helped with kind of my daily application of what I'm doing.
You've seen players on the other side of the table, if you will, from a front office perspective in the American League office. Now you're on the front office perspective in the team side. How do you think players as personalities have changed from a coaching / management to player relational perspective in the last decade?
That's a really good question, and it's interesting. So within the locker room, as I kind of touched on earlier, you have a very wide range of ages and experiences. Last year you had Cody McLeod, who played his 1,000th pro game, and you have 19, 20. This year Jesper is still 19 years old. You have 20-year-olds in the room they're not just trying to find their way as hockey players, they're still trying to find their way as people, right? I mean, I remember back when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, and I can't imagine being in the environment these guys are in, the pressure, the high stakes, the influences from their family members, girlfriends, wives, agents, friends. There's a lot of pressure on these guys and on these kids for that matter. And so they're trying to navigate turning into adults and grown men, all while trying to fulfill dreams that there's lots of high stakes involved as well. So it's really interesting to me, just the dynamic you get from individual to individual, and that's also one of the fun and challenging parts of the job that Tim Army and I discuss really daily, is how to connect to each individual to get the most out of them, to help them grow as people, grow as hockey players, to prepare them to be good someday, hopefully for the Minnesota Wild, but also on a daily basis for the Iowa Wild as well. It's managing kind of the short-term and long-term goals of that, and relating to every player is different. It really is. How you interact with a Cody McLeod is going to be different than how you relate to an Adam Beckman, for example, just throwing out his name as a young up and coming player, and anyone in between there. It's managing personalities, and everyone is different and unique, and it's fun and challenging all at the same time.
One of the most profound things that I love about people that work in our sport, and probably in any sport, but obviously hockey is the realm I know, so I'm going to relate to that. We all have moments where we looked around and we thought, what am I doing here, and why am I doing this? And one thing that I've learned from your path on the way to where you are now as general manager of the Iowa Wild is you did don the Louis the Lock Monster mascot outfit. at a local elementary school at one point in time. Can you take us back through that experience and how that came about in the now story of Mike Murray, the general manager of the Iowa Wild?
I guess that goes. There's no job that's too small or unimportant for anybody out there, right? And the story of the people who work in the mailroom, and next thing you know, they're the president or CEO of the company, right? I did an internship in college, during off time in between semesters or whatever. With the Lowell Lock Monsters of the AHL at the time. And there were times where I had to go do school appearances as Louis the Lock Monster. I marched in a parade. So it's funny whenever I see a mascot walking by, I feel a bit of a kinship of being part of the fraternity at one time or another. But I guess that kind of goes to advice to anybody is never say no to anything, really, right? And every experience you can get is a good one, and someday you can look back at them all fondly, hopefully.
Before we transition to the player side, I had one final question to ask about. I've been told that perhaps the most awkward discipline phone call that you ever had was while you were working in the ECHL, actually, and it involved some family members. What can you tell us about this phone call?
Good research, Benny. Yeah, so prior to my time at the AHL, I also held the position at the ECHL. I worked for the ECHL league office for 3 years as well. And for 2 of those years, I was the VP of hockey ops there, and all the same responsibilities that I had at the AHL. And at the time, my younger brother was playing in the league in the ECHL, and our dad, who is a player agent, represented a number of NHL players and whatnot. Was also obviously representing my brother, and my brother, he played with a bit of an edge, and he crossed the line one time, and we had to have a discipline hearing with him. So on that call was me, my dad, and my brother in a very professional setting, and we all handled it very professionally, and at the end it was, all right, bye, Dad. Tell Mom I'll give her a call later tonight. And but ultimately we did end up suspending my brother and for a couple games. And I remember he called me back later that night or the next day whenever we made the decision. And he was really pissed at me, and he goes, "Well, there goes your Christmas present." So.
How many times has that come up now later on in life, at family gatherings, times you are together? I'd imagine that's a pretty memorable experience for the Murray clan.
Oh yeah, we joke about that one all the time. It's like, and I jokingly tell them, "Well, you're lucky it was. I think it was a 2-game suspension. So you're lucky it was only 2 games." So.
I could have doubled that one up in a hurry, Chris.
Yeah, we have fun with that one.
Mike Murray, the hockey player. You brought up Dartmouth. That's where you played collegiately. Who was Mike Murray, the hockey player? What were the things that helped you get to the highest levels of college hockey, playing Division I hockey at Dartmouth?
Yeah, I mean, I getting the opportunity to play college hockey at Dartmouth. When anyone ever asks me how my experience was there, I always say I can't imagine having spent 4 years anywhere else. I loved the school. I loved the hockey there. My best friends are my teammates from there still. We keep in touch with regularly. And and it was fun. We had some pretty good teams at the time while I was there at Dartmouth, and it was fun. It was just a great experience. I look back with fondly all the time. Just your mind drifts back to those times, and it was great memories. And in me as a player, I used my head more than my brawn, I guess you could say, to get as far as I could. And and then after Dartmouth, 2 very unremarkable seasons of low-level minor league hockey that I know I got the most out of what I could do as a hockey player, and was as far as I was going to go. And it was time to find a way to stay in the game of hockey after that.
So I'm going to disagree with that statement about unremarkable, because remarkable doesn't always necessarily have to mean you scored 50 goals in a season, because I look at your first year out of school. Cincinnati Cyclones, Reading Royals, Richmond River Dogs, Augusta Lynx, Miami Manatees. By the way, some of these names are just outstanding. Trenton Titans, Adirondack Ice Hogs, Corpus Christi Rays.
With a Z.
With a Z. That's 8 teams in one calendar year, Mike. Did you ever take your stuff out of your suitcase at that point?
I was trying to find my way, and I wasn't ready to quit or
Yeah.
give up on it yet. And then the second year, I found a good place in Kansas City for the whole season, which was nice to kind of go through a season start to finish in the same place and really enjoy being a part of a team for the full season. And at that point, know that, yeah, that was enough for me, that experience, and know that was as far as I was going. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly times that I'm very glad I went through that experience. One, for my own peace of mind, but two, I absolutely bring all those experiences to what I do here on a daily basis. I certainly didn't do it at the highest level or even anywhere near to the AHL level, but I think the experiences are relatable to what a lot of our players are going through. And whether you're recalling or sending a player down, or in those conversations, telling a player at a training camp that he's being sent down to the AHL, or in Iowa when they're being sent to the ECHL. Yeah, I sat in that chair, so I know the feelings, what that player is going through, and yeah, I am very sympathetic to that, and try and you know, relate to the player as much as possible in those, because I know it's not easy. These are not just players wearing jerseys and jersey numbers. There are real humans and emotions underneath that as well.
Richmond, Adirondack, and then the full season you played with Kansas City, all UHL teams, which the team, the Danbury Trashers, has come out and become quite folkloric amongst the hockey community after that documentary came out. Did you ever play against Danbury? And if so, any memorable stories from those games?
No, fortunately not. That was the
Fortunately
same.
not.
That was the same error as that documentary. Kansas City happened to be in the Western Conference, and fortunately, they were in the Eastern Conference, so we
Yeah,
never
thank God.
overlapped and played them. But I played against a whole number of those players, as you know, they had been in different organizations at different times. But really, the funny part is that year in Kansas City, that was the year of the NHL lockout. So a number of players, there was the team in Missouri that year. So a bunch of St. Louis Blues players were playing for the Missouri team, and there was the Motor City team in Detroit, and a bunch of the Red Wings players were, like, that was the year Chris Chelios was playing for that Motor City team. So you know, in a way, you're competing against NHL players at a league several levels below the NHL, but it was a great experience measuring yourself up against those guys.
Lastly, from me, Mike, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. Summa cum laude from Suffolk University. You have your JD, your law degree. I got to bring it up because I got a wife who's in law school, so she'd be mad at me if I didn't bring it up. This is really one of the big ways that people that maybe don't get to the likes of a Bill Guerin get into the GM chair. Why is the law side so connected with people that want to get to the general manager chair like you have? Why does that aid in making you a candidate for a position like the one you've gotten? I'm sure the position you're still looking to get maybe someday too.
Yeah, as I realized my on-ice career was only going to take me so far, and I knew I wanted to stay in the game of hockey, it was a means of how can I distinguish myself from everyone else who wants to say, you know what, I want to work for a team. I want to be the GM of an NHL team. And so I use that as a means to essentially be a resume builder to distinguish myself. But at the same time, those 3 years were invaluable to what I learned. It teaches you how to think differently. You know, I certainly made sure I was taking elective courses on labor law, employment law, you know, working with CBAs. I had an internship at the Mass Port Authority in Massachusetts. So I was working with unions, all connected to the airport and transit system in Massachusetts. And yeah, it wasn't a very glorious job and was far away from working from an NHL team as possible. But the things I learned there, I absolutely apply to what I'm doing on a daily basis. You know, it's a lot of the same thought processes, just a different industry, really. So again, I have no doubt I wouldn't be where I am now without that law school experience. And I really enjoyed it too. I was really interested in my studies, and I was in school in Boston at the time, and had a great experience there during the 3 years.
I got a couple more questions.
I was going to say, he brings up Massachusetts.
No,
I was
no,
just waiting
no,
for you to
no,
jump
no.
in now.
I'm not
Yep.
going to ask the Massachusetts question. I know that's your big thing. I'm not going to get into that. I do want to talk about, you talk about obviously law school is hard work, guys, paying your dues, really putting in the effort. Fans caught a glimpse of it last week when we put the announcement out that Mason Shaw was named captain of the Wild for this year. This is a guy who's gone through some major injuries. He's really put in the time and the effort, and now he's getting rewarded for that with being a captain, with getting those recalls to Minnesota. Can you kind of give us some insight on the decision behind why Mason was the guy to lead the group this year?
Yeah, and those are conversations that started between Tim Army and myself, and I give Timmy credit for he really kind of spearheaded that push for Shawzy to wear the C this year, and it really stems from a lot of the reasons you just said. I think this is his fifth year in the organization now. And I said when we presented it, he's really the heartbeat of our team here in Iowa. The energy he brings every day, the leadership he provides, not just in kind of the spoken leadership, but the way he goes out there and demonstrates it every day, every practice, every game, every shift, the way he plays with his heart on his sleeve. And yeah, he's overcome a lot off the ice as well with his injuries, and he has overcome all of that to put himself on the brink of becoming an NHL player, and is an NHL player. I mean, he played already a recall this season. He played his way into that last year for the first time, and I think, as was touched on earlier, it's up to him to continue to push the envelope to hopefully, in his eyes and as an organization, become a regular everyday NHL player. And just kind of see one of our kind of homegrown players develop and grow over the course of his professional career to this point. And again, it's an example for the younger guys, our recent draft picks, our new guys, of what it takes to be successful. And a lot of times in the AHL, when you wear the C, it's a lot of times it's veteran players who that opportunity and that door has closed in their careers, but that is not the case for Mason Shaw. He is very much in consideration for recalls and opportunity with the big club, and the fact that he's wearing a C will not interfere with that decision-making process at all when it comes to him knocking on the door based on his performance to wear a Minnesota Wild jersey.
On that leadership subject, I mean, looking at a lot of the new face that we've brought in this year, one common theme that most of these guys have is at some point in their hockey career, they've worn a letter, whether it was in college or in juniors or on the national level at some point. Is that something that you and Bill are actively looking at when you're trying to figure out which guys you want to bring into the organization? Are you looking for guys with those leadership qualities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I consider that an organizational mandate from Billy on down to Judd Brackett and our amateur scouting staff there that he leads. And not necessarily does the player wear a letter, but do they exude those leadership skills that you're looking for? Are they a good teammate? Do they do the right things on and off the ice? How do they treat people? What is their work ethic? All those things combine into kind of those leadership qualities that you talk about. There's no set definition of it, but when you spend enough time like Judd and his staff do around these players, watching these players, talking to their coaches, speaking to the kids during the season when they're allowed, during the interview process, the combine process leading up to the draft, you really get to know these kids, and absolutely those are the type of qualities in a person that we're looking for.
And one of those guys being Sammy Walker, and that's an interesting situation with Sammy Walker because you get a lot of guys who are these prize college players who decide to forego their rights with the team that drafted them, and they essentially become a free agent. And so there's a lot of, you gotta sweet talk and you gotta wine and dine these guys. So obviously for Sammy, growing up in Minnesota, playing for the hometown team is an easy sell, but I'm sure there's more to it than just that. I mean, what was that? What were those conversations like between you and Sammy and his agent trying to get him to sign with Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, Sammy it's a unique situation where he was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning. The CBA allows after the senior year, if he does not sign with the team that drafted him, he can become an unrestricted free agent that summer. So we had the same opportunity as every other club to sign him, kind of midsummer there. And I think it's a credit to Sammy that he wanted the challenge of coming to try and play for his hometown team. A lot of people would want to, well, I'll try and go elsewhere. There's too much pressure, family, friends. He's from the Twin Cities area. He went to the University of Minnesota. Maybe it'd be good for me to get elsewhere, but I think he has embraced that challenge of one wanting to sign here and the opportunity that we were providing, and now he wants to come and he wants to become a Minnesota Wild NHL player, and his career is off to a great start here. He is a great kid. I think a 2 or 3 time captain at the U. He exudes those qualities of a hockey player in person that we're looking for. And the way he skates, he's just starting his pro career, but the future is very bright for him, and we are very happy that we were able to get him signed and into our organization this summer.
My last question, going back a little bit more on the GM side of things. So Tom Carver is someone who is beloved by this organization. What did it mean for you to be the one to take over for him after his passing in 2021? And then is there something that he taught you that, or you've learned from him that sticks with you to this day that kind of helps you day in and day out?
Yeah, that's a really important and good question, Joey. And I'm probably the person least equipped from our organization to speak about TK, because I really spent the least amount of time from Billy and Chris and Matt as part of the management group with TK there before I came in, and then Tim Army and the coaching staff here where he worked very closely. But I was fortunate in my position with the league office where for a few years I did get to deal with him as he was kind of, the Iowa GM and representative for Iowa. So he and I would speak occasionally on the phone, and in those experiences, I really enjoyed every conversation with him, which getting to know him a little more closely in the year that we kind of overlapped and worked together for the Wild. I leaned on him during those times, and now knowing that that's how everyone thinks of him, I'm just happy and fortunate that I had those limited exposures to him that I did, and my biggest takeaway is the way he treated people. I carry that with me every day, is how he treated other people. He didn't know me from Adam when I worked at the league office, but every conversation we had was meaningful to me, and I appreciated every one of those, and the way he treated me, as opposed to maybe some other people around the league may not have. And then the way he accepted me to the staff here during that time. And yeah, that is my biggest takeaway with him, that again, a daily reminder is the way he treated people. And I have applied that to my everyday life. Absolutely.
To conclude, Mike, Joey, myself, you are all examples of people who played the game. You at a much higher level than Joey and I, but did what we had to stay in the game. There are countless examples of this, of people who fall in love with the sport of hockey at a young age and then realize they're not going to make it, but they say, maybe I can make it doing something else. Why do you think hockey does that? Why do you think it grabs people and it doesn't let go?
I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but it's seriously like my personal experience, my family. So my dad played college hockey. He played college hockey at Boston University, won 2 national championships there in the early 70s. Has been a player agent for his professional career. My older brother played hockey. I played hockey. My younger brother played hockey. I really just think my mom supported us, driving us to rinks all over creation, the early mornings, all of that. Everyone kind of has the same stories, the skating, frozen ponds, backyard rinks, whatnot. It's hard to really put into words how special it is. And I can't imagine my life without hockey. It is special to my family. It is special to me. It has provided me an adult life that I hope to continue being a part of for the rest of my time working, and I hope to bring that to my family as well. I think it's a way that you can connect within your family to other families, and you're in this special community of other people who are going through the same experiences as you are. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, how you do it. You're all going through it together, and everyone has those same shared experiences, and it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Well, Mike, this has been a shared experience that I've thoroughly enjoyed. Thanks so much for this time today. I know our fans are going to love this, and we'll look forward to seeing you shortly here, coming up when the Wild obviously are back in town to take on upcoming opponents in November.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun talking all things Iowa and hockey with you guys.
A giant thanks to Mike Murray, General Manager of the Iowa Wild, as well as the Director of Hockey Operations for the Minnesota Wild. Had a great chat about those dual roles, which have always intrigued me. That's a lot of work for one guy to do. But, you know, the one thing that I think Mike does so well, and as someone who is one of my direct superiors, and I deal with him a lot, is he treats people with such kindness, but he knows how to get things done as well. Because as a boss, I think sometimes it's easy to be almost too much of a player's coach or too much of a hard-driving taskmaster. He, at least in my opinion, has found that nice line between where you respect him, but you know that you need to get your job done too. And he's not going to give you too much leeway if you're not doing what you need to do. So, but some really fun stuff there from Mike. It was fun to get him a little bit out of the GM mode there and get him rehashing some old stories, obviously dressing up like Louis the Lock Monster. Got a good smile out of him too. Really good stuff from Mike, and a big thanks to him for taking some time for us, as he's maybe even busier than we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a good sign of a good leader, you know, to be able to operate that way. And we saw the same thing with Bill, and when we interviewed him over the summer, I think the two are kind of cut from the same cloth and have that same build up, and I think that's why they work so well together. You know, it's interesting to pull back the curtain and see how they're constructing a team, what they're looking for within certain guys and things like that. So, great conversation.
It's another one where the architecting of a hockey team, to me, is one of those things that I could spend hours listening to people who have done it, whether it's Bill Guerin or Lou Lamoriello, or, I mean, the stories that you'd hear and the pressure cooker situations that some of these people have been in, where you're trying to get a deal done on deadline day, or you're just trying to get a deal done, period.
Yeah.
That stuff to me is just riveting. So it was fun to take a few layers off the onion with Mike there. And we'll look forward to doing it, talking about that maybe again with him later on down the road as our podcast continues to unfold. But we're excited about the in-season version of this podcast, and that I think for our fans too, we got to talk a little more in the now, where I think during the summer we were obviously very heavily focused on reminiscing and taking a walk down memory lane, which I was happy with how we began in the now, and then we did take it back a little bit with Mike too, which is great. So we'll look forward to doing that again with some more guests as we continue our podcast throughout the season here.
Yeah, hopefully some live guests. We put guys right in the middle here and chat with them a little bit. I know. You know, I think like we've talked about a lot over the summer, the goal is to do these once a month at a minimum in season, depending on the months and travel schedule. We might be able to do a little bit more, but it'll be good to get, you know, some of these players in here. We talk to them, get to know them a little bit more, you know, outside of the rink, you could say, even though we're in the rink. But, you know, off the ice is the best way to put it. Kind of get to know their personalities a bit more, which I think is exciting because we talked about it last night. There's a great group of guys in that locker room. There are no bad apples in there. Everybody's bought in. Everybody's excited to be here, and they're just good people. So we're excited to have guys like that around.
As we wrap here, because I know you need to get out the door, because sometimes the only time to run a good errand is over the lunch hour during the hockey season. That's real. But we are October, looking into November. What are some of the promotions that fans should be looking at for listening to this podcast and thinking, hey, I'd like to come to a Wild game in November?
Yeah, so really wrapping up October, we've got our Fright Night, our Halloween game. So come dressed in your Halloween costume. Show that off ahead of time. We'll have some trick-or-treating on the concourse for the kids pregame. So different candy stations set up. A lot of Halloween-themed elements during the game as well. And then in November, I mean, we've only got 3 home games in November, which is crazy. But they're 3 pretty big ones. We've got our school day game, which I know is your favorite. It is. And I'm looking forward to that one as well. It's going to be so loud. I think we've got like 6,000 kids, 6,000 tickets out for schools, which is
so bring
amazing.
my earplugs for
bring earplugs. But we'll have that. So that's going to be on the 3rd. The following night's Hockey Fights Cancer Night. We'll have mystery pucks on sale like we did last year. We'll be recognizing survivors throughout the game. We'll have I Fight For cards, which people can actually fill out this coming weekend. We're going to take those cards and kind of decorate the outside of the locker room. So as guys come in, it'll be all decorated with, who people fight for. And then the last one in November is our Veterans Appreciation Game, which will have a hat giveaway, specialty camo jersey that matches the hat. We'll be recognizing, veterans throughout as well in partnership with the ALS Association, who is heavily involved with veterans who are, going through their battle with ALS as well. So not a ton of games, but a couple really exciting ones for sure.
Some juicy ones.
Yeah,
yes.
on the promo schedule, absolutely.
IowaWild.com or 515-564-8700 to get your tickets to any of those games.
Correct.
Joey, thank you for this. Great to pinch one of these in here in the middle of the season.
I like it.
I like keeping promises. We said we were going to do this in season. I think when we said that, we were like, we hope we're going to be able to do it. So to do the first one to me is great.
Once we got through opening week, I was like, we should probably throw one of these on the calendar and get it done.
Yeah.
And we said, let's squeeze it in. So, I'm excited.
Yes, thanks to Joey Goldstein, to Marquise Jones, as well as to General Manager of the Iowa Wild, Mike Murray, for a ton of time here today. Really appreciated that and hope you, the fans, enjoyed it as well. And a big thanks, as always, to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. This has been episode 13 of Ridin the Bus, the official Iowa Wild podcast, presented by Explore Minnesota. Until next time, for Joey Goldstein, I'm Ben Gislason. Two honks for the win.